Alrighty, welcome back. In this video, we are going to set everything up so that our task list activity is going to be prepared, so to speak. So you can see here at the top, we can see the board name, and then later on, we want to, of course, have the task list here. We will already see how we can create tasks, how we can load the tasks, but of course, we are not able to create tasks yet. And that's what we, of course, will do later on. But as you know, it's a huge project, so there's a lot to do. So let's go ahead and start with that first. So the first thing that I think makes sense to build is going to be a new model, which we will put into models here, of course. So create a new Kotlin file, and it's going to be a class. So I'm just going to call this one task. So the idea here is that each board can have multiple tasks. All right. So here, I'm just going to say that it should have a title, which will be a string. And by the way, this is going to be a data class. So I think it makes sense to add this here and put the var title in there. It should also be parcelable, of course. So we'll need to do that. And then created by will be a val because it will never change. Okay, so each of them will be an empty string for now. And that is it. Okay, so when we create the task, for now it will be empty, but later on we will add information in there. And this one should be parcelable. And if we do that, we need to make a change here, implement the members. And let's add those two here. And let's also add the parcelable implementation. So here after the parcelable read string, we need to add that. And other than that, it should be pretty much good to go. We don't need to have these brackets here because we're not going to implement the constructor or do anything in there. By the way, write to parcel, well, here, for some reason, it didn't work out for me as I intended it. So I'm just going to add the values here manually. So first of all, I will need to add with the destination or dest. It's not the destination, but dest. And then write the strings here. And then I'm going to get rid of this question mark here to make it simpler. And describe contents will simply return 0. Okay, and the rest can stay as it is. That is going to be our task class. Next, I'm going to go over to the board and create a new entry here because we don't only want to have the document ID, but of course also a task list. So here, array list of tasks should be an empty array list for now. And of course, accordingly, we have to make adjustments here as well. So the first thing is that we adjust the constructor here, okay? And what we will do is we will, first of all, add a comma here so that we have another entry. So parcel dot, and here it becomes a little more advanced. So we are using a typed array list here. So not a string array list as we had before, but this time we're using an own type, which is task. And when you do that, you also need to add a creator here. So when you hover over it, it needs some more details here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to use task.creator. So what is this task creator? Well, if you look in our task class, or to be more precise, if you look at the creator, you can see that we have this companion object, which is the creator, which is our possible creator of a task. So here we create a task from parcelable or from the parcel itself. And that is what we need to pass in here. And it's still complaining, so let's add the two exclamation marks here as well. And then here we will also need to add something to our write to parcel. Parcel dot write typed list, where we then pass in our task list. Now, if you look at our project, you can see that this is the Watch Simpsons. So this is the title of our document, and we want to pass the title over, but more specifically, we want to pass the document ID over so that we can get all of the information about this specific board. Okay, so in order to do that, we will just go to our constants, and first of all, create a new constant, const val, and this one will be the document ID of type string, and I'm going to assign document ID here. And why would I even need that? Well, once we click on the board, and I mean the main activity here, once we click on the board itself, when clicking on the adapter, what we wanted is to start an activity here, right? But what we want to also do is we want to pass some more information here. So for example, we would like to pass in details about the document that we want to open. So let's cut out the intent. Let's create an intent here. So val intent will be our intent that we had before, from the main activity over to the task list activity class here. And then this time we pass in some more information to our start activity. So we need to add this to the intent. So put extra. And where do we want to put it? Well, in constants.document ID. And what kind of information do we want to pass in? Well, model.document ID. So this model is what we get from our onClick here. So we get the board, which is our model, and in the board class we have this document ID, and now we use that in order to put it into the intent and pass it over when starting the activity. Okay, so that's the idea of this change in the code here. Then we can get the details in our task list activity, because now we can catch it once we are in this view. We can just go ahead and say var board document ID is going to be an empty string, and then we get the actual string from the intent. So if the intent has some extra information at the position of constants document ID, then we want to use board document ID is equal to intent get string extra at the position of constants dot document ID. So we're basically just passing over the document ID from one activity to another. In this activity we catch it, and then we have it here in our variable document ID. And now we can load that document ID from our Firestore class. So first of all, let's show the progress dialog real quick. And then in order to do that, we of course need to make sure that this class is inheriting from our base activity that we created. Then we use our Firestore class to get the board details. And get board details is a function that we still need to create. So we pass in the activity and the board document ID. Okay, so let's create this function in our Firestore class. So to just go ahead and fun get board details. Here we need to pass in the activity, and here it's our task list activity, and then we need the document ID, which is of type string. So document ID, which is a string. Okay, so this is the information that we need to pass when we want to get the board details, and then we can go ahead and do the whole getting of data from the collection. So here it's very similar to that code, so let's copy it. It's very similar to our Firestore collection getting the boards. But this time we don't want to get it where the array contains a certain information, but we just want to get the document where the document ID is the same as the one that was passed to this function. Okay. So then if we get that, we can now use that document to first of all log something. So we are going to log document to string dot here to string. Then we can for now get rid of this whole code and also this part here. And now what we want to do is get board details, and these are the ones that we are going to again do in the task list. So here we're going to create a new function, fun board details, which needs a board. So here I'm gonna say pass in a board. Let's import board here, and here I'm first of all gonna hide the progress dialog. So then I want to set up the action bar, and where would I get it from? Well, we can get it from the main activity, but we can also look at some other activities where we set that up. So let's look at the base activity. Did we set it up here? I think we didn't. Then in the my profile activity, I think that we had a very sophisticated function here, which was set up action bar. So this one here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy this one and I'm going to reuse it in my task list activity because it's going to be very similar. So first of all, we have the setup action bar function, which here now is going to use the toolbar task list activity. And it's super important that you adjust the toolbar task list activity settings here at the set navigation on click listener as well, because otherwise you get a crash. Then the action bar can stay the same. The title, however, is not going to come from the get string, but it's actually going to come from the function call. So here I'm going to say that pass me the string, so pass me the title, and I'm going to display that. So now what we can do is we can do that in board details. So we hide the progress dialog once we load the page, and then we set up the action bar with the title, which is going to be board.name. So each board has a name, right? And here we want to get that name and we want to display it in the toolbar there at the top. So that's what this function does here. This setup action bar is going to set that up, and also it's going to add a little back button as well as the on back pressed functionality once we click on it, and it will be called in the board details this time and not in on create. So now we can go back to our Firestore class and finalize our to do, and here we just say activity dot board details, and here we can pass in the document. So document to object, and what kind of object is it? Well, it's of type board. So board class .java, and this can go wrong, or this could be null, and that's why we need to add the 2 exclamation marks. Okay, so at this point you might be a little confused because I jumped around between the different classes, but it's the same approach that we had before. So in our Firestore class, that's where we handle all of the loading of the data, right? So we're getting the board data from the collection. So we get it from the boards collection, then we have a document there with the document ID. So each board has a document ID, a unique one, and we want to get that. And if that was successful, then we're going to load that document and we're going to use that as an object of type board. And we pass that to the board details function in our task list activity, because get board details is going to be loaded in this activity. So we need to pass on this task list activity, which means that in the end we get to this function here, where we then set up the action bar, where we then load the title that was passed to us, by the way, is the board name that is then passed to us, and we set that as the action bar title. So basically what we did is we got the board document number, passed it over to this task list activity. In the task list activity, we loaded the board for that number, and we loaded the name of that board. All right. Now you could have, of course, also just directly from the board itself sent over the name, but that is not going to be enough for later stages, because later on we don't only want to have the board name, but we also want to get more information on this task list activity. So it makes sense that we load the data anyways. All right. Okay, so that is it for this video. By the way, before we finish it, let's test whether this actually has worked with our own examples there. And there we are. Let's check out the board with image, and we can see the title is there. Let's go back. Let's go to board 1, and the title is there. All right. So it seems like we are opening the actual boards, which is amazing, because now we can go ahead and use that knowledge to display all of the details about the board, which contains all of the different tasks, which then contain all of the different cards. Okay. So thanks a lot for being with me, and see you in the next video.